We're just a few weeks into OTAs, but wide receiver Calvin Ridley is exactly who the Tennessee Titans hoped he was. I'll tell you why on today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Calvin Ridley is balling out at Tennessee Titans OTAs, and he is exactly what the Tennessee Titans were hoping he would be. And JC Latham is proving to be a leader already. We're going to talk about that, plus some comeback kids who could shock us this year, and I'll tell you who wasn't at OTAs on Wednesday. Before we get into all of it, thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. Let me know who you are down below and throw a thumbs up on the video. If you're watching on YouTube right now, it really helps out the show, and the show's always free. So all I ask for in return is the press of a button. But Calvin Ridley continues to show out at Tennessee Titans OTAs. He already looks like he has a great connection with Will Levis. He looks fast. He looks explosive. I mean, every single video you see of Calvin Ridley running, it's just obvious how different his speed is. And I talked about this earlier this week. My everydayers will remember. Calvin Ridley needs to be the Tennessee Titans' number one wide receiver this year. Not in terms of schematically, not the X. He's going to play Z receiver, play in the slot, but production-wise. The Titans are paying Calvin Ridley $23 million a season. Okay? They paid Calvin Ridley to be their number one wide receiver. And not only do they need him to get value on the contract, but his skill set is what this team desperately needed. And according to Titans head coach Brian Callahan, Calvin Ridley has been everything that the Tennessee Titans were hoping for already. They've already seen exactly what they wanted to see from Calvin Ridley. Here's what Brian Callahan had to say after practice via TennesseeTitans.com. Quote, "He's everything we thought he would be. That's always exciting when you sign a guy in free agency and you hope, but you don't always know. You go by what you hear, what you see. It's always beautiful when a guy gets into the building and he's everything that you would expect him to be. He's a great pro, phenomenal person to be around. He's incredibly talented. You see his speed and burst when you watch him on the field, and I think he's really going to help us. He's a pro's pro. He prepares, works hard, loves playing football. Those are the things you hope for when you sign free agents. He's lived up to every one of those so far. Again, a lot of work to go, but I've been really happy with him." And notice the pause there because I write like a freaking doctor, okay? Terrible handwriting. But regardless, my handwriting may be terrible, but Calvin Ridley is fantastic. And this is what I've been talking about for the last few weeks now. When asked about Calvin Ridley, he is just a different dynamic than what the Titans have presented. We've talked about the separation numbers last year. Even a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, great player, phenomenal player, but he's not the separator that Calvin Ridley is, or the route runner that Calvin Ridley is, or have the speed and the burst and the quickness that Calvin Ridley does. Ridley is a totally different dynamic to this offense than what the Titans have had in quite some time, and I'm just incredibly excited about what he's doing right now out on the field. He's been all the OTAs. He's present. He's learning. And Calvin Ridley even talked about it after practice, according to A to Z Sports. He's talking about, like, I came from Alabama, man. I love to practice. I'm ready to go out here and prove it. Like, out on the practice field is where you prove it. Love hearing that kind of stuff from Calvin Ridley. So, like, we've talked a lot about, guys who could come back, guys who could surprise us, guys who are fighting for a spot, guys who need a strong start. rarely do we take the opportunity to say, hey, these guys who we expect to be outright ballers are being outright ballers. You know what I mean? Very rarely do guys just live up to it, and that makes the headline. So Calvin Ridley has been everything the Titans need and more, and he's not the only one. JC Latham continues to impress in an incredible way, and he's not only playing fantastic ball out there in practice, but he's been a leader so far as well. I mean, we're hearing from Brian Callahan this, Latham, he doesn't carry himself like a rookie, which is always a good thing. He's very intentional about his work. He works really hard, spends a lot of time on this. I think he understands, which not all rookies understand, that this is a job and there is an expectation, especially when you're drafted where he's drafted, that you got to come perform. And I think he's aware of that. Not everybody always is. He's got some maturity to him, also has a youthful wonder that's fun to be around. Every day is new to him. He just loves playing football. So there's an enthusiasm he carries with him around the field that I think is fantastic. He's getting better with technique, and I think it's going to be really fun to see where he ends up between now and a couple of weeks from now when training camp starts and the pads come on. He's making the right progress. He's made of the right stuff, and he works really hard. Those two things are a good start for him. I mean, JC Latham is off to a start as a Titans first-round pick right now that we haven't seen in quite some time. I mean, Pete started out well, but, I mean, it just, with this coaching staff, it feels totally different. It was always, you know, this rookie's got to earn it, blah, 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 blah. We'll see. Starting Will Levis at third string. Like, this guy isn't a starter. He's got to beat out the vets. And, blah, blah, blah. And there was always this nonsense of, you know, making these rookies earn it and not giving them their just, doing all that. And those days are done. I mean, Chikakonkwo even said to the media after practice that the vibes are totally different. They're immaculate. Everyone's more relaxed. They feel like they can be themselves. And I love how we don't have to play this stupid game of, oh, he's doing okay. Yeah, he still needs to work better. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Oh, well, he's a rookie. He's low on the depth chart right now. We'll see. Blah, blah. Like, let's stop playing games. Calvin Ridley got $90 million. He's a stud. He's acting like a stud. JC Latham was the number 7 pick in the draft. He needs to be a starter right away and a leader. And that's what he's doing. Like, we don't have to hide or try to act like we're hiding stuff from people to help win games or anything. Like, let's just be honest here. And this is the kind of honesty we want, the kind of transparency we want, and it's all good news, baby. So Calvin Ridley, JC Latham are delivering for the Titans early on. Now let's talk about some people who need to make a comeback for their NFL career, and some of them are going to get an opportunity to do just that. So we'll dive into that. Before we do, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Look, Gametime is the best place to buy tickets. I tell you guys all the time, and I will tell you again, they have the best features in the industry. You get all-in prices, so you actually know what the price of your ticket is when you're looking at the prices, instead of getting sticker shock at the end when you're trying to check out. You get a view from your seat, so you literally know what you're going to be looking at when you sit down. And they have the Gametime guarantee, where if you find tickets in the same section in a row for less, Gametime is going to credit you 110% of the difference. I know football season is a little while away, but the NBA Finals is here right now. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets and buy some tickets from the NBA Finals with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, that's LOCKEDON NFL, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We talked about Calvin Ridley and JC Latham balling out and delivering early on. Now I want to talk about some guys who have the potential to be comeback kids for the Titans. And we saw a couple of them have some good plays on Wednesday. Before I get into it, I do want to thank you again for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. But we saw a couple of guys make some plays on Wednesday, and it was nice to see. It was nice to see, I must admit. It's a sight for sore eyes with some of these guys who have been disappointing so far in their Titans career, kind of come back to life a little bit and start showing signs. Now, one of them I'm not getting fooled by. Another one I am just absolutely hoping for. All right. And we'll talk about those guys now. Number one is Treylon Burks. Treylon Burks had a really nice catch down the sideline in OTAs. Full speed, continued full speed on a deep route. Guys have tendency to slow down. He didn't slow down. He kept full speed throughout the route, caught the ball on a running start, and didn't fall down, which, in my opinion, one of the problems with Treylon Burks, one of his issues as a player, is he does not have great balance. And when you're that big and you're that fast and you're moving that fast, you have a tendency to lose your balance. It's like a baby deer. You know, they just don't realize how big they are. They have a hard time keeping their feet under them, all of that. So we saw Treylon Burks make a nice play. And Burks talked afterwards about, he's incredibly confident, in great shape, going into year 3, all that stuff. And then Calvin Ridley, pouring gasoline on the fire, compared him to A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, said he's a stud, he's sick, he's a freak, a guy that big, that fast, blah, 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 he's going to be fine, all this stuff he was saying. And I've been saying it, the Treylon Burks hype train, it's ready to leave the station again, folks. It's ready to leave the station. And look, I'm not going to buy it until I see it. I am not going to believe in Treylon Burks until he proves it. And at this point, why would anyone have faith in Treylon Burks? It just doesn't make any sense. It wouldn't be logical. But it is a new system. He is a third-year player. He's had 2 seasons to kind of figure out what he wants to do, who he needs to be, all of that. He's got less pressure on him now than ever before because he's not even a starter in the Titans' 3 wide receiver set. Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd. So the pressure is as low as ever on him because people have given up on him and he's got people ahead of him on the depth chart. The offense is probably going to be as conducive to his skill set as possible, more than before. I mean, Todd Downing and Tim Kelly did an okay job, but it's a Mike Vrabel offense at the end of the day. Also, worth noting that Tim Kelly's offense that he runs, which is the Earnhardt-Perkins system, is much more complicated and much more mentally taxing than what Brian Callahan is going to be using. So, my point is, while I don't believe in Treylon Burks, and I'm not going to have faith in Treylon Burks, and I refuse to get on the hype train and act like Burks is going to be anything this year. If there was ever a time for him to change the narrative on his career, it's right now. It's this offseason. It is right now is when the Titans need to do it, is when he needs to do it. This is when it would matter. So, Treylon Burks having a good offseason. You've heard it before, but he's having a good offseason, and hopefully, this time is different. This time is different. Now, Burks is somebody I don't believe in. And while I don't believe in this next guy as a comeback kid, we saw some positive signs. And that is a first in a long time, and it's Caleb Farley. Caleb Farley had a couple of pass breakups in some of the video footage from OTAs. Caleb Farley looked like he was moving well, stayed in the corner, in the hip pocket of the receiver, made a breakup, used his hands. Look, another guy, I'm not going to get on here and tell you that Caleb Farley is going to have a comeback year. Okay? I can't say that. I just can't believe that with everything he's been through. And Callahan talked about it last week. Like, a lot of guys would just shut down and quit with everything he's been through, not only on the field with the injuries, the back, the ACL, the poor play when he's been out there, but with the tragedies, his house, his dad, his mom. Like, I'm 33. I still have both my parents, and I'm blessed to say that. Caleb Farley is what, 24, 23? Already lost both his parents. His career is in the toilet. His body is betraying him. Like, if there is anybody I'm rooting for personally more on this team than Caleb Farley, then point him out. But that's it for me. You can't root for anybody personally more than Caleb Farley. So to see him back on the field and working, going through drills, making plays, knocking balls away from guys, just doing football stuff, like, it makes me feel good. I don't know how else to say that. So is Caleb Farley going to come back? Is he going to make an impact this year on the field? Probably not. But, man, it's nice to see him have some positive moments and be out on the field. And who knows? Like with Treylon Burks, who knows? New system, new coaching. If he's healthy, which is the biggest factor of all, maybe Caleb Farley doesn't make a comeback to a starting level player, a first-round pick, but maybe he comes back and he's just an NFL player, a depth guy. And the Titans need as much depth at cornerback as they can have, especially Jarvis Brownlee Jr. is 5'10". He's really a slot nickel cornerback who could probably play a little bit on the outside. But if Caleb Farley turned into a decent depth player, then you have your number one backup outside corner. And then Jarvis Brownlee Jr. could be your number one backup inside corner, slot corner, with versatility to play a little outside if needed. And now you have a great five-man group. That is a very solid five-man group. So let's hope that Caleb Farley can stay healthy and just continue to work because he needs reps so bad. All right. Two other guys who I think could kind of come back and shock us here. Number one, Elijah Molden. Everybody's talking about the Titans signing a safety. Go get a safety. They're going to get a safety. Rand Carthon's saying that we're looking into signing a safety. Blah, 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 blah. Maybe they do. And they should. They should. Because it would put Elijah Molden in a better spot. But maybe Elijah Molden impresses in camp. And they just decide we're rolling with Elijah Molden. That would be an interesting story to watch. And then Sadiq Charles. Justin Mello pointed it out. Thought it was an astute observation. But Sadiq Charles is 320 pounds. And Brian Callahan talked about Cushenberry and how big and stout he is and how they really want to fortify the middle of the pocket. Well, Brunskill is like 300 pounds. Dylan Radins is maybe 310. Well, Sadiq Charles is 320. And Bill Callahan clearly handpicked him as a signing the Titans needed to make. So Sadiq Charles, who's been a backup, had some starts, this and that, he could come back and kind of turn his career around and prove that he is a full-time starter. And it would be very intriguing to see if that happens. But with that being said, do want to tell you guys who missed OTAs on Wednesday and tell you whether I think it's a big deal or a little deal or no deal, all of that. So we're going to talk about that now. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We talked about Calvin Ridley and JC Latham absolutely meeting the challenge early on. We talked about some guys who had some okay days in OTAs and could turn things around. Now I want to tell you guys who was not at OTAs and talk about whether those absences matter or not. Before we get into it, thank you again for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Do want to remind you guys, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. It's on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. It's called Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts from Locked On, plus all our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. But number one, and obviously it is high on my concern list, T'Vondre Sweat, still not out at OTAs. So that means that's 2 weeks, last week, and now the start of this week. No T'Vondre Sweat. And I think it was Paul Kaharski who tweeted T'Vondre Sweat could be out there, blah, 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 blah. Well, he wasn't. So I explained on yesterday's show why it's concerning for me. He needs the conditioning work. Is this a silent holdout with his contract and maybe a weight conditioning clause in the contract? He needs to learn the defense. He needs to be productive with where he was drafted. Like, there is a lot of reasons here why it's a bit concerning that Sweat still isn't on the field. All right. What was the injury before mini camps? Was the injury after the rookie mini camp? Was the injury while he's catching footballs in the end zone for videos for social media? Like, when did this happen? What is going on? Definitely something to keep our eye on. At right tackle, Nicholas Petit-Ferrer still not out there, still rehabbing the shoulder. And, Leroy Watson is out there showing himself, being involved. You got to start to worry a little bit about NPF. Can he actually come back and have a real good shot at that right tackle spot? If he's not ready to go at the start of training camp, major concern. Major concern. Jalen Duncan, still not out there. He is fighting for his NFL life. So that is not a good sign, because even when he gets back with the team, going to be behind the guys who have been out there so far. So TK McClendon, another guy, he's just not good enough for me to be okay with him missing time like this. The Titans need more depth on the defensive line. I just do not trust the defensive line depth. Kenneth Murray was a guy who wasn't out there, who was out there last week. You hope it's not an injury. Maybe it's just rest, a prior commitment. It is voluntary. I'm not too concerned about that, but with the situation the Titans linebacker group is in, if they had Jack Gibbons and Cedric Gray as their starters, would be a little concerning. Honestly, even if Kenneth Murray's out there, it's a little concerning because I'm not a big Kenneth Murray fan. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm not as concerned with the Kenneth Murray thing as I am, Sweat, NPF, Duncan, McClendon. DeAndre Hopkins was a guy who wasn't out there, and I'm just not concerned about Hopkins at all. He has great chemistry with Levis already. He's a guy who's proven that he can learn systems very quickly. He's just a proven entity. I'm not worried about DeAndre Hopkins. Let him rest. Let him go do whatever he wants. Not that concerned. Same thing as Jeffrey Simmons. I said this yesterday, the day before. I just have no concern about Jeffrey Simmons. I know what he is about. The Titans know what he's about. He's going to be just fine. Same thing, L'Jarius Sneed, Harold Landry. Not concerned about those guys at all. NWI, Nick Westbrook-Akine was another guy who wasn't out there. And Nick Westbrook-Akine may not be a great player, but I trust him. I trust him to know what to do. I trust him to work hard. I trust him to take care of his body. I trust him to be in shape. I just trust Nick Westbrook-Akine to do the right things. So I'm not that concerned that he wasn't out there. And then Colton Dowell, we know about Colton Dowell. Major injury. I wouldn't expect him to be involved with the team until mid-season at earliest. So those are the guys who were not out at OTAs and why I'm concerned or not concerned about that absence. But that is going to do it for me today. Excited to be back with you guys tomorrow to cap off the week, talking more Tennessee Titans OTAs. Do not miss that. But with that being said, that is going to do it for me today, folks. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this is Locked On Titans.